It's my typical. There you go. What's going on, everybody? What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to my BookTube channel. It's been a while. It's probably been about a month since I've done anything, crazy stuff with baby going on, my wife going back to work as a teacher, and that's been super stressful. And then, of course, just, full-time job. But it's nice to be back. And today I'm joined by Djèlí Clark. He is the Nebula and Locus Award-winning author of the short story, The Secret Lives of the Nine Negro Teeth of George Washington, and a Hugo Nebula Sturgeon and World Fantasy nominated author of the novellas The Black God's Drums and The Haunting of Tramcar 015, not to mention being a finalist for a couple of those. His newest novella, Ring Shout, will be released on October 13th from Tor.com Publishing. But Mr. Clark, how are we doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, making it.
All we can say in these times, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Times.
Yeah, exactly. First off, just let me say how much of a pleasure it is having you on this evening. I've been a big fan of yours for a few years now, and
thank you.
Ring Shout, which you've read my review, but it's without a doubt my favorite novella of 2020, and quite possibly ever. So seriously, thank you for being here.
Wow, that's a great honor. Thanks.
Yeah. I actually wrote in my review that I think it's the best thing I've read from Tor.com since Victor Laval's The Ballad of Black Tom.
Oh, wow. That's that was some inspiration, definitely.
He's an amazing writer. And
we're reading The Changeling right now, and it's just amazing writing.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But, I know among the chaos that is the pandemic and the election season, I'm sure life's kind of interesting, but are you hanging in there?
Is it? Like, what's happening? Is something happening in the news? I was uncertain. Yeah. I couldn't have written all of this. Could not have written it if I tried.
I don't think anybody could have. It's the I don't even, is it science fiction? I mean, we did call it apocalyptic, I guess.
An editor would have said, that's implausible. Come on, let's be serious.
There's no way that, people will be walking around in masks and then also being mad at people that aren't walking around in masks, and then also having an election with the candidates we have. We'll leave it at that.
Let's leave it at that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's funny. I don't know if you watch South Park or any kind of parody shows or cartoons, but they had their they had their pandemic special episode the other day, and it just killed me because every time I see somebody improperly wearing a mask out, they joked and called them chin diapers because everybody wears it below their nose.
I've seen those. I've seen people wearing those jock straps or headgear. I've seen all kinds of things.
It's nuts. I mean, I'm assuming it's everywhere, but I feel like definitely here in the South, a lot more people are more arrogant toward it. Because
we have in New England. You have in New England. Even the people who want to, I've seen the people who are just. I think we don't have a culture that is used to wearing masks, and because of that, I think people just don't know. And then it'd be great if we had some kind of weird national response that, told everybody on the TV, this is how you wear the mask, and had a cartoon. I mean, I don't know. I don't run government, but, just following here. And, that might help people who want to wear masks understand how to wear masks. But
right.
What you gonna do?
Is it supposed to cover the back of my head? I'm very confused.
It's almost as if the people who are currently running government don't know how to run government. It's odd.
I mean, I feel like it's been like that for a while. I feel like everybody is about to start going like the Josh Malaman route of Bird Box. Everybody's just gonna wear it over their eyes.
Yeah, that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah. Well, kind of starting us off, I want to know a little bit about you, a little bit about your life, childhood, kind of going through grade school and secondary school, and just kind of how you got to where you are today.
Right. Oh, you just want me to start off? So a long time ago in the galaxy. No. So I was born in Queens, New York. My parents were immigrants from the Caribbean, from the island of Trinidad and Tobago, Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. And so I was born there, lived in Queens for a while, lived early in Brooklyn. And then I think before I was fully 2, my parents sent me to live in Trinidad with my grandparents. Multiple reasons, because I had childhood asthma, because they were young people trying to get their lives together. And this is kind of common with immigrant families. They'll send you to live back home with the grandparents or family. And so I was. And so my early years were living in Trinidad and growing up with my grandparents and understanding that my grandparents were my parents, right? This is when I become cognizant, oh, they're the people I live with. These are my parents. And my parents would come and visit, and I'd be like, these very nice people come and visit and give me things, and that's great. They give me presents, they come around, they hug me, they seem really to like me, and they're nice. But my grandparents are my parents. I'm a young Trinidadian boy. That's how I saw myself. I went to they call it first standard. I went to first few years of that there. And then my mom came, took me back to the United States, and culture shock. I went to New York. And even though New York has a large Caribbean community, I was on Staten Island. That's all I'll say about that. it was just culture shock, right? Even coming back. And so lived in New York for a while, got acculturated, lost my Trinidadian accent by watching a lot of Peter Jennings. He used to be a reporter on ABC, and that's who I would watch to learn the American speech. So went to school for a short while in New York, and then picked up again, and we moved to Houston, Texas. And it's in Houston, in Texas, I will spend most of my life, right? It's pretty much the place where I'll grow up, my formative, my teen year, my early childhood, teen years, and then much of my adult life before I end up moving back to New York as a 30-something-year-old adult, and then recently now I live in New England, in Connecticut. So what can I say? I come from a family of nomads who have moved, and I mean, to this day, my sister's in Atlanta, right? I'm in Connecticut. We're just all over the place in a sense, right? We've moved a lot. And, I think that I can definitely say that over time, that's influenced who I am, my writing and everything else. I often wonder if that's why my characters are often searching for themselves and their identity and where they belong in place, because I've gotten used to moving from place to place at times and having to sometimes reinvent myself, immerse myself in this new culture, new understanding. It's almost like a portal fantasy, walking from world to world. There's just, no dragons or anything on the other side.
Yeah, we might be on their way there.
Yeah, right. That'd be great. And so, I always say that's my biography, and then I guess we can talk about how all those things I think have shaped how I write, the things I write about, and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was a culture shock going from New York to Houston because it's that completely different.
Bigger than moving from Trinidad to New York. I think the bigger one is moving from New York to Texas, because I was like, wow. I thought I would get off and I'd see horses, and I did see some horses, and I would see different things. But Houston, the South was different. It was also my parents being again immigrants from the Caribbean at that time. Houston didn't have a really large Caribbean immigrant population, or they were scattered. And so, it went from in New York, all my friends were pretty much a mix of a lot of kids from the West Indies, kids from Puerto Rico and other places, and as well as African Americans. And when I moved to the South, then my entire cultural immersion became like a Black Southern understanding of culture and speech and everything else. And that, that took acclimating. But, that's literally where I grew up. And so people always ask me, where am I from? I was like, I could tell you stories, but I have to claim that place because it became a place where I spent the longest part of my life.
I gotcha. So tell me about your life outside of writing, and we'll basically say your career outside of writing, because I know it probably has a little bit of an influence on your writing.
Yeah, a little bit. So, it's funny. I don't often think of it that way, but it does. I'm a historian. I teach at a university here in Connecticut. I'm an assistant professor of history. And so I study actually issues of slavery and emancipation, as well as slavery and popular culture and film. And I'm currently working on a manuscript. I write outside of this stuff. I have my work writing that's required. And so I'm currently, for instance, working on a journal article about these riots that took place in 1834 New York. And they were these anti-abolitionist, anti-Black riots in 1834 New York, done in part because it was believed that these abolitionists were in league with British abolitionists, because that's also the year that British emancipation begins in the nearby British Caribbean. And so there are all these transnational intrigues going on where you have these New York pro-slavery folks in league with, believe they're defending the South and the Union against these abolitionists and their Black allies who are bringing these foreign ideas of Black freedom from the Caribbean. So that's my current. I'm writing an article on that. So that's what I do when I'm not doing this other stuff.
all the other things.
Yeah,
I gotcha. I mean, I assume that obviously takes up a lot of your time. I can't imagine you have time to also
writing to writing.
Yeah. Writing for enjoyment, not writing for work.
Yeah, that's like my primary thing, writing, and now teaching online. And then it's grading online and everything that's happening now because of the pandemic. And I kind of use speculative writing. It's almost like my treat. Like, when you finish something, I get a cupcake or something. I get to go write some speculative fiction. But I got to get done with all this other stuff first. And then I can go have podcasts with you or do these other things. And so even though like now that, I have contracts and things, it's become less of this is fun, and like more like, I have to get this done. I sign things. And I put my things. So
I said I would be done by a certain time.
Right. And so I don't want to say it's become a chore, but it's no longer the simple, I'll write when I feel like it, and I'll just spin off what I want. Now it's okay, I got to focus. I got to get this done.
I will say that I do like hearing that my chat is a treat. I do like that.
Yeah. I get to do this. It's great. I can get out of 19th century newspapers.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so I know a lot of people ask authors the question, how did you get started writing, or when did you get started writing? So I've got kind of a twofold question. So when did you start writing, and when did you start writing seriously?
That's a great question. Right? That's a great question. I mean, I think I started writing when I was a kid, right? I loved anything to do with book projects in class. I love getting those poster boards and doing book projects. I love that stuff. I still have one I did for the Two Towers, I think in middle school, where I swear I got it exactly what Jackson would do in the films. I'm like, that's it. I drew my ants the same way. I have the death of Boromir. That's perfect. Right. So, so I used to read a lot, and my parents encouraged me to read a lot. My mom would take me to the library constantly, my sister and I. So I did a lot of reading, and that kind of triggered my inspiration. Like, hey, maybe I can do some of this. And so I would write. I made little comic books, but mostly they were maybe for class or for friends or for my sister or something like that. And but it was just always play. Right? It was just always something I did on the side. I didn't go to college thinking, I'm going to do writing. I didn't even go there to thinking I was going to do history. I started off as a pre-med major. That's a whole other story. Right? So it's funny how things can take. I got the doctorate in some way, right?
There you go.
But I didn't. I don't think I took the idea of writing seriously until sometime after college. Even though between that time I'd been reading, doing little bits of things here and there, it just wasn't on my radar as something that I would do as a career, or even as something I would do with the hopes of getting published. And we can go into a lot of reasons why that would be. Not often seeing people that look like me, and it's not even consciously that I'm doing it, but I'm simply, that's just not in my wheelhouse, right? I'm not going to be a writer. It's like, that's not going to happen. And I don't think it was like until, again, after college, as I'm sitting around and I've gotten to read like a lot of Black authors that I didn't get to read when I was a kid, like Octavia Butler and others, and seeing that, look at all these here are these Black writers creating these things, and I have ideas I want to say, and I want to put them in speculative formats. And I think it wasn't until then that I started saying, okay, let's see what I can do. And I started trying to write. Though even then, I would say for most of my early, even serious writing career, I think it should be in stages of serious with air quotes, I had no idea what the market was. I had no idea how long a short story should be. I didn't know where to submit anything. I was completely divorced from the whole world of agents and querying. I was just writing to write.
Right.
I don't think it would be like another maybe 6, 7 years from that time, or maybe even 10 years before I was like, okay, now I kind of have an understanding of how the writing world works. Right. So it took a while.
Yeah. I say from draft to who do I submit this to?
Right.
How long does it take to get some kind of feedback?
Yeah.
Is an agent going to happen? Like,
yeah.
I can imagine there's a bunch of what
ifs. Right? Like my short stories would be like, I'm gonna write a short story, 30,000 words. I finished my short story. What do I know? I'm completely ignorant about markets and how long short stories should be or how long novels should be. And so it's just, it took a while to learn that. But but it was kind of liberating and fun because all I was doing in the beginning was writing. Mm-hmm. And every idea that I possibly had was like, I think it was my most creative time because I was just writing everything. Whether or not I look back and I like any of it now, it was still a really creative moment. Yeah.
I gotcha. Now I'm going to go back a little bit. I need to see the Two Towers projects that you say you still have it. You got to post it at some point just so everybody can bask in its glory.
I should go back. I had it at one point, and then you go home to your parents' house, and you're like, "Where's all my stuff?" Oh, we put it in the garage. Oh, you put it in the garage, and so I haven't seen it again. For all I know,
it was crushed under everything. Yeah.
Yeah, don't leave things at your parents' house. They say, "Well, you didn't want it. It's been here for like 15 years." So,
yeah. You remember that closet that was in your bedroom? Yeah, we cleaned it out.
Yeah, exactly. So,
gotcha.
I still have it committed to memory, however. So,
that's good. There you go. So, do you have any particular writing habits or daily rituals that you use to get the words flowing? I mean, I guess for work and for your treat writing.
So one of the things I had done, and this was for work, was I took like this. They had this course and this boot camp on how to manage time, which really gave me a lot of pointers on how to manage time for my academic work, and I kind of brought that into my creative work. Even though they're like two different things, I flip off a switch and turn on another one when I start. I even have 2 different laptops that I work from to do creative work and academic work, so that when I pull up my academic work, I'm not like trying to go back and look at my manuscript or vice versa. And so I guess the habits I learned from there was actually, blocking out certain segments of time and writing. I think one of the most important things was, if you say you're going to write, just write. Don't try to go read the whole internet. Don't say, I need to go get another cup of water. Or I need to get some coffee. This is pencil needs sharpening, because they talked about how people procrastinate, right? And then you look up and you go like, oh, look how much time has passed. I guess now I only have 10 minutes. Maybe I shouldn't write at all. And you'll be amazed how often that'll continue. And so one of the habits I developed was, if you're going to write, then sit down and write. Right? Even if it's not the best thing, just sit down and write it down and get it down. And then you can look up and say, oh, wow, I got, time passed and I did it. And so that's one. The other habit I do, and this doesn't work for everybody, I'm not a person who can go and write like the middle scene or the end scene and then come back to the beginning. Impossible. Like, kudos to people who can do that. I cannot. I have to write from the beginning and take it to the end. And in that sense, I create sketches and outlines for everything I write. Like, it'll start off, used to start off in little notepads. Now it starts off, thanks to the phone, that little notes feature in phone. I make sure I update that constantly because I have entire stories just bullet pointed in there. And I can tell, like, this is the first part, this is the second chapter, and so forth. And then when that's done, I move it to something like Scrivener, which is the only thing I use Scrivener for, by the way. It's a great place to hold my outlines. And once I have an outline, it's so much easier for me to write the story because now I know pretty much what's going to happen next. I know where I'm going, and then it's like filling space and just getting it done. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So based on the stories that you've written so far
Mm-hmm.
and say published so far, how much do you divert from, I guess, what your outline is to what the finished product is, or do you pretty much stay with your outline from beginning to end?
You never really do, because when I start off my outline, because normally by the time it gets to the outline, I've really gone through, and it really goes through the most changes probably when I'm just doing the notes. Where I'll have notes where I go in like, it could be this, or it could be this, or this. So I've given myself all these options. And so by the time I sit down to do the sketch style, by the time it gets to Scrivener, that's the new thing, right? It used to just be in Word, but by the time it gets to Scrivener, it's pretty much been, I've plotted out chapters and everything, right? And so that's what I go by. But however, it always changes. I said I was going to do 15 chapters. Guess what? I need to add in a whole other chapter to this thing. I can't finish it in one chapter. Now I've ended up with 20-something chapters. This was going to work for a while, but I found out this just doesn't fit with the plot. This makes the plot too clunky. And so, yeah, I will say for the most part, the bare bones of what I've written, I found I often stay there. Right? Like it's not going to, I don't fundamentally like, oh, wow, a completely different story. In fact, I will sometimes decide to verge into like a completely different story. And then after about 20 different versions that I save, draft 1, draft 1A, draft 2A, I tend to come back probably to that original version is what I found, no matter how much I diverge. And so, it's going to change as you write, undoubtedly. But I think, because the way I set up my writing, I tend to still stay within the skeletal framework of what I started with.
Okay.
Before the editors start telling me the things I need to change. That's all.
Before the editors hack it to pieces, right?
Yeah, it's always good. My editors offer me great advice of enhance this. Do we need this part? And I have to argue with them and argue with myself for why something is needed or maybe why it needs to go and all those things. Yeah.
Thank the world for editors, right?
Right.
For good editors.
I like magical creatures from Fillory. So,
who would you say are some of your biggest writing influences? I guess then and now.
Right.
Whichever you choose.
Yeah, I suppose if I were to, I guess within fiction, let's say within speculative fiction, I think that you're influenced by who you write. So it's funny, a lot of my early writing probably sounded a lot like, I don't know, David Eddings or Robert Jordan, because I was, I'm going to take 4 pages to tell you what someone's hat is like. And it was that kind of writing. And I think later on, though, I think my influences became people like N.K. Jemisin and modern writers like Victor Laval and others, a lot of contemporary writers, and just looking at how they put words together, looking at how they examine things, looking how daring at times they are, or how they subvert certain tropes and ideas. I think that's probably influenced me more than some of the earlier people that I was probably copying and looking at, right? And then I think some others, like I think people like Tananarive Due, for instance. I think her world building, how she takes a contemporary world and just kind of changes it a bit with her. I think it's the story about the Living Blood series. I mean, it's just so well done, and looking how she makes that real world, how she makes it our world, and yet somehow a little different by adding these world building elements. So things like that have, really been helpful.
Okay. How do you prevent and/or break through writer's block?
I'll tell you this. I don't know that I get a whole lot of writer's block. Now, what I do get is procrastination. Like if I haven't had the story yet, I'm going to keep looking and walking by it. Like Ring Shout, I think I pitched Ring Shout in April and it was supposed to be due like in August. I started it in August because I was kind of just like, I got to do all some other stuff. And so I don't get writer's block. What I tend to get is getting started when there's a blank page there. I'll keep putting it off, putting it off. I need to do some more research. I need to do some more of this. I need to think about it more. But once I actually start writing, because again, by then I have the sketch, that helps, right? Also, little techniques that I'd heard from other writers. I heard a writer once say that when they write, they park things downhill. And what they meant by that was, when you are writing and you know exactly what's going to come next. In fact, you've been so excited to reach that part. They said, stop, don't write it. Because you'll probably rush through it anyway. But don't write it, stop there, park your car downhill, basically. You know where you're going. And then when you pick up again, you're not like, okay, what am I going to do today? You know what you're going to do today. You're excited to get to that part. And so I use little techniques like that. I think probably prevents me from just coming and staring at the screen. But yeah, I think that helps me. I hope that helps me not get writer's block, knock on wood. I'm probably going to now go and be unable to write, but that helps. And I guess one last thing is that before I commit to a story and I'm writing it, I'm imagining it for a long time. And back in the olden days when we used to do things like go to the gym, right? I would literally be sitting and thinking as I'm doing reps or something, I'm thinking about the story and I'm working through the story in my head. I'm doing it while when I used to have to do long commutes, I would think up these stories constantly. And so, if the story sits with me in a way, then I'm always jotting down these new notes. It helps me with that, So.
Gotcha. So kind of coming back to something I hinted at earlier, how does your work as an academic historian influence and/or enhance your work?
Yeah. I think it's not even like I set out to purposefully do so, but there are just things I'm going to see in the real world that sometimes, even though I'm reading about it historically, that creative part of my mind is like, this is wild, right? This actually happened. And then you begin thinking of it more fantastically. So I remember I was telling someone, why do I do that? I don't know. Why did Tolkien decide? I could just tell you about ecology, or I can have some talking trees do it. Right? I can just tell you about how horrible it was during World War I, or I'll create the dead marshes in Mordor, right? And so I think as writers and storytellers, we take from the real world in ways, and we may enhance it, perhaps for the same reason people have always told fables and tales. It gets people's attention in some ways, right? And so I think in that sense, I think if there's a way that my academic work impacts me that way, where I'm sometimes not purposely doing so, but I realize that the idea I had, it came from this thing I happened to read or this thing I studied. And so, yeah, that's really helpful. Plus, when it comes to researching, I take some of those same tools that I have to do academic research, and I apply them to, doing my magic on Google. Yeah. What kind of wine did they drink in 1920s? Yeah.
Yeah, I keep thinking back to The Haunting of Tramcar 015 back in the beginning, and I think it was something they were eating. Yeah. And it was like constantly like just describing it. It's just kind of made you want, just to jump through the page and grab some yourself.
Yeah, food is such one of the perfect things of world building. And I think it gets short thrift. And I think some people realize how important food is in world building. So, and I think the person who I thought so, and I thought maybe it's just me. And then I heard the author Saladin Ahmed of the Crescent Moon stories. He has a lot of food in there, and he actually said it in a thing. And I was like, yes, vindication. Yes, food builds worlds because everybody has to eat. Yeah. Food is universally communal. People tend to do it together. It's what you spend. You can spend your time doing everything else, but what becomes a question, hey, what are we going to eat today? It can become a very long conversation. You spend time going to grocery stores and things to find food. Before that, we foraged for food. We hunted. So is this important part of society, right? We put so much into it. And it's my thing to writers, my little secret to writers, don't leave it out. People will notice when you bring up food in a meal.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't take a whole lot. I mean, you can just have it at the beginning and then not mention it again and then like randomly, throw it back in there. But
and people will remember.
Yeah. Obviously, I did.
There's a great book, by the way, and it's semi, I guess I would call it more a little bit magical realism. It's called The Pasha of Cuisine, and I can't think of the author right now. It's a Turkish author. And his entire story built around food. It's an amazing story because it's entirely built around the notion of food having these magical essences and impacts on people, right? And this author has weaved this entire very complex tale set in an Ottoman Turkey based on this, and it's fascinating.
Interesting.
You can do a lot of things with food.
Yeah, exactly. So while I could sit here all day and ask questions about the Black God's drums, the haunting of tram cars, 015, I want to
thank you for saying 015, by the way. People can say, I don't mind if people say anything, but 015 was how I thought of it. So I'm always interested. I've heard people say 015. Someone once said 01S. I said, that's a new one. That's good.
That's a new one, yeah. I mean, I always thought it was 15, and I listened to the audio.
I heard 15.
And he says 015, and I was like, well, that has to be how it is.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit about your new your upcoming releases.
Oh,
so
yeah.
First, yeah, that one right there. So obviously first we've got Ring Shout.
Look, it's actually thicker. People wanted me to write more. Good, you got a little bit more.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're a hefty little tome for a Tor.com novella. Not many people almost scrape 200 pages.
Yeah. People like novellas. Thank goodness for Tor, because as I said, my overwriting self, I have a ton of novellas and novelettes that were simply sitting on my sitting somewhere in Dropbox because there was no place to publish them.
Yeah, keep them coming. Yeah, I mean, Tor's been killing it for several years with their novellas.
Yeah.
So can you tell first off, can you tell the audience a little bit about it, your influence behind it, and how you managed to mesh dark fantasy, historical fiction, and supernatural horror?
Yeah, I don't know how I put it all together, but yeah. So I mean, the idea for Ring Shout, and also I guess you kind of, I was gonna say what it is. I think of it as a Southern Gothic fantasy with a lot of horror. But it is fantasy. There's a heroine, there's swords, there are monsters, and it is somewhat set in our world and not, right? It is things that are familiar and unfamiliar, written through fantasy, right? And so, like you were asking me earlier about taking academic worlds and history and putting it within writing. I think this is a story where I probably did a lot of that, a lot more than in others, right? This one definitely has it. The idea for it, I think, started bubbling up sometime in 2015. I don't know what brought it to the fore, but I started thinking about this larger story, and I think I knew certain things. I knew I had a heroine with a sword. I thought of it. I said I want it to be set in the South, right? I want it to be set in our world, but a world that's a little different, right? So not exactly urban fantasy. I don't know what you want to call it. Southern rural fantasy, something of the sort, right?
Make up something new.
Yeah, and I knew I wanted it to be sometime in the early 20th century. And I didn't know much else. I didn't have anything else exactly down. And I think from there, as I said before, how I would just start thinking up ideas and sitting with it. This was the year before I earned my PhD. I was doing a fellowship in a small town in Pennsylvania, this college in Indiana, Pennsylvania. And I lived in DC, Washington, DC, right? That's where my wife was. So I basically had to pick up for a year and live in the small town of Pennsylvania, but I would go home like every other weekend or every weekend or so. And that's a long drive. I forget how long the drive was. This long. It's through hills, there's fogs. There's everything. And that was a great time to simply sit and think. And I think that year I sat and thought about that story a lot. I would play Ring Shout, the songs that accompany Ring Shouts. I would play some of them and just listen to them as I went along. And, when I would stop and I'd finish driving, I'd jot down notes. And then a lot of things just got thrown in there. I remember watching Beyonce's video for Formation. And I remember I was like, there are whole scenes here that I'm going to incorporate into this story. And it didn't have a name yet, right? But I knew it would fit. And I just kept it there, but I was busy doing other things. This was when I was getting a dead in Cairo, published. I was publishing some other short stories. This was before the haunting. This is before I even thought up the haunting of Tramcar 015. So this story was thought up before that, right? And so I was doing all these other things, so I didn't really have a chance to get to it. But it would just always sit there in the back of my head. And then finally in 2019 is when I pitched it. And I pitched it on a whim because, and we'll talk about Master of Djinn, I suppose, soon. Master of Djinn, I finally signed with Tor in 2019. I was going to do this novel, but the publishing world is slow. The novel was going to come out for a while. And so my editor at the time, Diana Foe at Tor, she was like, well, do you have anything else? Maybe something like a novella that can come out between? And I said, oh, well, I have this idea. I said, I think I want to call it Ring Shout. And I pitched the idea, and she was like, that sounds great. And that's kind of how it started. That's kind of how it started actually becoming a thing. It went from this idea in my head to something now I have to write it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you were talking about, the horror aspect. I mean, the body horror itself is mesmerizing and also terrifying. And so, you're talking about how the idea had been kind of simmering for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, had the creatures in the story, had they also been just kind of simmering around your thoughts, or was this something that just like clicked and you're like, this is what they have to be?
A little bit of both. While the story started, like I said, bubbling up in 2015, a lot of the elements of it were older, like a lot older. Before I got my PhD, I actually got a master's way back in the day, 15 years ago. I got a master's, and that master's was based on issues of memory and slavery, and reading these accounts by ex-slaves that were taken by the Federal Writers Project during the Great Depression. And it's this whole trove of them. And so I had written my master's thesis, which was on enslaved women and violent resistance and memory. But while I was doing so, I was reading all of these narratives. And it's within those narratives that I first saw former slaves who had lived through Reconstruction in the South talk about the Ku Klux Klan as monsters, right? Called them spirits, claimed that some of them had horns. And so those ideas had been there, right? Before I even knew I was put it all together in the story. There's my daughter. Saying hello. So before I even knew that I had a story, I had basically bookmarked all those things and written notes on them, because I was like, this might be useful someday. My first introduction to night doctors came from reading those things, about hearing about night doctors. And so there were all these little things that came from there. And so when I went to write the story, I went back to those narratives. I had to go and find those old files, which were on, like things that we don't use anymore. I had to hunt them down on wherever they were and pull them all up. But it was great re-immersing myself in that, because that was helpful. So when you're asking again where those creatures and things came from, a lot of them predated the story, though I may not have fully imagined and fleshed them out until I actually sat down to write the story.
I gotcha. Yeah, those night doctors, man, those are just some trippy scenes.
Yeah, the night doctors were the most interesting, because I actually wrote a story about the night doctors before I wrote Ring Shout. And it was when I was still trying to think up Ring Shout, but I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something with these night doctors. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that the night doctors would be in Ring Shout. And so I wrote a whole short story based on the night doctors, and it's actually about the character, Dr. Antoine Bissett, and how he meets the night doctors. So it's like an origin story. And that story is, by the way, going to come out for anybody who reads Ring Shout. That story is going to come out in November, but I'll let the people who are going to put it out announce it. But I wrote that first. And when I wrote Ring Shout, I remember looking back to that, because it had a similar style and feel. And I remember thinking, I want to bring that story that I wrote into this story. I was like, can I do that? Is that allowed? I remember looking around like, am I allowed to have a crossover like a comic book? Like I used to love comic books. That was my favorite, right? Like when, the Avengers are going to cross over with the X-Men, like it's a big thing. And so I pulled the crossover. I bought in characters from a completely different story. I'm not even certain if it's the same world. And I bought it into this one. And, I didn't know if it would work. I remember when I finished Ring Shout, I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, It's too many things going on. It's such a mashup. I said, this is not going to work. And I sent it to Diana, and it takes a while for your editor to read and everything. And I was like,
Right.
waiting, what's she going to think? But she was like, no, this works. This is great. And she really hyped me up and made me think, okay, all right, I'm on the right track. Great.
I was onto something. Okay.
Yeah. Though I was not expecting, and I'm really thankful that people like yourself and others really like the story. Again, it was I'll get this little story out here. I really had it in my head, but I'm waiting for Master of Jin. That's the big thing. And so
yeah, you're over there just like I'll get out there.
Its reception has been like, I'm still like, really, y'all like this story? Okay. The weird one.
There's so much bigger, many bigger things to come. And
yeah, I was like, okay,
this is just like something I just threw together, guys.
Yeah, it was like I just threw this on. And people loved it, and I'm really thankful. But it shows you how you can be surprised, which of your works are going to that's really going to generate interest, right? Because I've written other stuff, and I've had that happen before. Like, I thought you would like this other thing, but if you like this, I'm not telling you what to like. Thank you. I'm thankful that you like something that I did. So
yeah, exactly. So Misty had asked this question a little earlier, and I wanted to get to it after we talked about Ring Shout. So she goes, so you, Tochi Onyebuchi, and Rivers Solomon have written novellas about the Black American experience. Do you think that you're all onto something bigger now that you've covered slavery, Jim Crow, and modern systematic racism?
Oh, wow. It's funny that we all have, and I think it's also interesting that, and I don't want to speak to Rivers' background, but I know that Tochi's of also Nigerian descent. My parents are from the Caribbean, and yet we've been immersed in many ways within Black American culture and history, right? I personally get this from my mother, right? My mother kept books by John Hope Franklin in the house, and my mother probably immersed me more in African American history than in my history of Trinidad, right? That was the history. She came here when she was 20 something. She met Angela Davis and stuff like that. So this became her history, and so I grew up in a sense with this. I guess my own form of double consciousness with having my background as linked to the Caribbean and also this steeped culture steeped in African American history and culture, right? And so I'm so happy to be able to put all that out there, and I tend to try to blend the two. So you're always going to probably see some aspect of the South. You're going to see some aspect of the Caribbean and all this placed in here. But to answer the exact question, I don't know if I can't say that when somebody says I'm going to go on to something bigger, I don't know exactly how I go on to something bigger when we're talking about something like slavery. Again, I'm a historian of slavery, so it'll be kind of hard for me to go on. I taught it yesterday. I'm teaching a class on comparative slavery. I'm teaching another one on the Haitian Revolution. So there's a way that is going to be part of my reference. And not all my stories are part of that, yet it's something my stories do, right? There's stories I write that have nothing to do with any of that. But yet that's also going to be part of it. And so you'll probably see more things from me based on issues of where slavery is part of it, right? And history, and these histories are part of it because it's part of what I study. It's part of what excites and interests me. And I understand that some of it often I understand it's traumatic, and sometimes as a historian, I have to realize it with my students. They're talking about certain things that I see from a historical lens. I was like, it's not that it's not traumatic to me. It's that I've seen a lot of it. And even though it's traumatic, it also interests me. And I also believe it should be spoken of, like, especially with speaking of enslaved people. I think of most enslaved people never got a chance to write a narrative, never got a chance to have their voices put out there, right? And so one of the things I like to do when I do history is to try to uncover those voices, give them a voice, right? They didn't get to speak. Let me try to piece together what someone may have thought. And so sometimes in my writing, if I'm talking about things like slavery, like in the 9 Negro Teeth of George Washington, I mean, that was one of the things I wanted to talk about, that here you have enslaved people who gave up their teeth. We have no idea what their lives were. We know all about George Washington, but we have no idea what their lives were. So how do we recover their lives? And so I decided to do it through a fable, right? That was also grounded in little bits of history with goblins thrown in, things like that, but also some history, right? There were always ways anyone who was in the know could immediately pick up, oh, he's talking about Colonel Ty, the New Jersey runaway slave who fought for the British. Oh, he's talking about George Washington's cook, right, who ran away. And so these are things from our history that I pull in there, you know, because I think it has to be done. So I don't know. I can't speak for anyone else, but I know with me, you're going to see more of that, but you'll also see other things. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Last question I got for you, because I know we've both got children to tend to. Can you tell everybody a little bit about your upcoming fantasy debut novel, A Master of Djinn, which comes out next May?
Yeah. So, and I just received the digital book version for copy edit. So, yay. Get to read that again and go through the entire book. So, you know, I wrote a story called The Dead Djinn in Cairo that was published in 2016 as a novelette on tour, and it was a surprise. Again, the reception for it was, I was nervous. What's going to happen? I have the biggest audience I've ever had in writing at the time, and people liked it. And that inspired me to write another story in that world called The Haunting of Tramcar 015. And so after 2 novellas, I said, well, I got to get a novel out of here. And so I'd started off, when I first started writing, I started writing novels, none published, right? Before I could even figure out how to write short stories. And so this was my return to writing novels again. And it's basically a novel length version set in that world. It returns us to the character Fatma, who is the agent in A Dead Djinn in Cairo. There's a new mystery to solve. You're going to see other characters from The Haunting of Tramcar 015. Yes, Hamed and Unzi are going to be there. Everybody wants to know. And it's really my attempt to expand the world even further, which The Haunting of Tramcar 015 allowed me to do. It allowed me to flesh out the world more than I did in the first. This one, even more so. And so it is, you know, there's adventure in it. There's snarky things. There's humor. There's djinn. There's magic. There's steampunk. Yeah, hope people like it.
Fantastic. It's almost like you did, you know, you're like your freshman, your sophomore, and your junior. So is there gonna be like an epic senior novel after after Master?
My huge giant tome now.
Yeah, your 800-page epic.
Well, that's the one thing about mysteries like this. You can't make them long, huge epics. People are with you for a long. My dog wants to be in the shot now. Okay, thank you, everybody. Everybody's embarrassed. Yeah, he's really acting up. So yeah, you can. Yeah, okay, buddy. So yeah, I think you can do that with like a really long fantasy tome. You can do that with your world building. I think you have to pare it down a bit, but you know, I hope one day to write the huge doorstopper, giant Malazan-esque books that will, you know, stack up as tall as you are when they're all done. Again, I started off writing after reading Robert Jordan, so you know it's coming at some point.
There you go. Well, I'll go ahead and end on that note. And just again, thank you so much for coming on and chat with me. I'm definitely looking forward to A Master of Djinn, and I'm going to continue yelling about Ring Shout until everybody reads it. It's so fantastic. And you know, obviously, we're looking. You know, I know a lot of people are looking forward to it coming out next Tuesday.
Yes.
But just continue doing what you're doing, because you're doing a phenomenal job.
Thank you.
Can you tell everybody where to find you on social media?
I can be found on Twitter at Djèlí Clark, and I also have a website. My official website is also my name, www.pjelyclark.com. So easy to find.
There you go. Well, thank you again, and thank you everybody that tuned in. And yeah, we'll try to do this again sometime.
Thank you, David. These were great questions. Had a great time here.
Same here. Thank you so much.
All right.